is Dustin here, the state? No, okay. He might be here tomorrow. If you guys want to report some sightings, and he'll. I don't know if you guys are familiar with MUFON. It's Mutual UFO Network. It's the largest UFO reporting center out there. So we have in Utah, and Dustin was talking to me yesterday at the ranch about sightings picking up in southern Utah. And when I was doing this full time, I would make graphs and take reports and stuff and try to figure out where the hot spots were. And southern Utah during when I was really peaking on this was hardly ever being reported. And yet this year, southern Utah is like really, really hot. It's a hot spot. Normally in Utah, the hot spots are here in the basin, out west here in the West Desert, and up north by Hill Air Force Base in Logan area, Roy and stuff. There's lots of sightings up there, and I think they're more or less attracted to the bases around here and the technology that we're using. I'd like to share one story with you that we witnessed out at Dugway back in I think it was 2004. I had some insider information that said that some testing was going to go on that night. So we went out to the Knowles exit recreation area out there, and we drove all the way out to the fence line, and we set up our cameras. About 1 o'clock in the morning, we were thinking about leaving because we weren't seeing much. And right when we was like packing our stuff up and putting our chairs away, we witnessed on the other side of the mountain, over by Granite Mountain in Dugway, what looked like an arc welder, like this light flashing, and then all of a sudden a beam of light shot up, and it pierced the cloud and went into space. Just before that happened, we were smelling like static electricity or ozone type of smell, and we noticed that. And then when that beam fired, we all broke out our cameras and video cameras, and we got some good footage and pictures of this thing. And then it just went off like a light switch. So about, I don't know, 20 minutes later, we seen the same thing start happening, this arc welding type light from the back of the mountain, and another beam shot up. And the second time it fired, 4 blue lights came down from space and completely surrounded this beam like they were watching what was going on. And I do believe that, because Dugway does test a lot of weaponry out there, high-tech stuff, that I think that when we're shooting weapons into space, our babysitters come down and say, what's going on here? So I think what happened there was when they fired that weapon into space, it caught their attention, and they came down to watch the event. When they surrounded this beam, they just sat there until that went away, and then they flew away. We had footage of this, we have pictures of this. It hit every news station in Utah. So Fox 13, Channel 4. Fox 13 took the long to release the story because they wanted to look into it more and contact the spokesperson at Dugway and everything. The other ones released it right away. It was like sweep or something, so they all could do like their own story. They never mentioned the UFOs in the pictures or the video. They only mentioned the testing that was going on. The spokesperson from Dugway came forward. Steve Barron from Fox 13, who was a weatherman, took the story, contacted Dugway, contacted the spokesperson at Dugway, showed him the pictures that we were taking and some of the video. She totally denied that there was testing going on that night until Steve Barron pointed out to her that in the pictures was their signage. And then she changed the story and said, yes, we did have contractors out there doing experiments, but our contractors loved their privacy. So they weren't going to say what happened, but she finally admitted there was testing going on that night. Dugway is one of those places that I get a lot of correspondence from people that work out there. I just had one come up to me 5 minutes ago and tell me some stories that she witnessed out there. The amount of stuff that flows into me from Dugway is overwhelming, and I can't keep it up with it all. But I definitely can start connecting dots with some of the stories that I hear out there and some of the contractors that I meet. It's fascinating It's one of those things that I'm super into, and it proves that a lot of the technology that they were testing at Area 51 has been moved to Dugway. From what I hear from insiders is that most of the space related stuff has been moved from Area 51 to Dugway because Area 51 is so popular and being watched. And the other reason why they took it to Dugway is because it's like 5 times bigger than Area 51. It's not only Air Force, but it's Army, and the airspace goes beyond their boundaries. So it's a perfect spot to test things like this, especially when it has a history of, a bad history of open air testing, chemical testing, and that scares a lot of people away. People don't want to go near the place. They still do open air testing every year, and they don't warn anybody, and it's kind of strange. Those tests are called Jackrabbit. They're usually open cyanide tests, and like I say, we're 60 miles, anybody in Salt Lake is 60 miles downwind from that, and they don't warn anybody. I mean, when I go out there, there's rock hunters out there at Topaz Mountain, there's people camping at Simpson Springs, there's people all over the place out there, and for them to be doing these open air tests is just wrong, in my opinion. Another thing about Dugway, it has no oversight whatsoever. No congressional oversight, no independent oversight, so they can do whatever they want out there with no accountability. And like the spokesperson said, they love their privacy, so they're not going to let anybody know what they're doing out there. And I think sometimes they like to play out a little bit. But another interesting fact is Utah houses a lot of companies that make space parts for space planes, rockets. We have Mort Vicol, AG&G, all sorts of companies here that are making space-related product. If they're making it here, they're going to test it here. They're not going to fly it to California Test Range or the Nellis Test Range. They're going to do it right there at Dugway. It's a lot closer. They have a lot more privacy. If you guys want to see some crazy, weird stuff, I'm telling you, Friday nights are the night to go out by Dugway. It seems to be really hot by the Knolls exit. And then if you take Simpson Springs out by Topaz Mountain on the Dugway Range, follow the Dugway Range out as far as you can see the runway out there, Michael Army Airfield, and you can see Granite Mountain, which also has an underground base in it. You can look it up on Google Maps and see the entrance to this place. Now, I met a person who said that a laboratory was contracted in that underground facility, and they stopped work because of bats. That bats infiltrated the cave system, and they're endangered species, so they had to move out, and they don't use it anymore. I don't believe that one bit. I think that was a ploy to try to get me away from that subject. And I do believe the guy worked at Dugway because I threw him through some tests and he passed them. So I definitely know that he's been on the base, he worked there, but he was feeding me a line of BS to try to deter me away from that area, more or less, saying that nothing more goes on. I get a lot of that from people from Dugway that I think that are trying to infiltrate our group or what have you, and kind of discourage us from going out there and doing our thing. I have been intimidated in the past for things I've posted on the website. I've had people come to my door and intimidate me and more or less tell me I need to take some things off the website that they don't want to see. And so from then on, I was really, really careful on the terminology I used and what I posted from insiders at Dugway. And I could see why they were upset about that, because I was posting times and dates of testing that I was being given. So I think they were really frowned upon that. But just letting you know, Utah is very, very strange and unusual. It's a great place to live, and we have probably more phenomenon and mysteries in this state than any other, in my opinion. We have it all from UFOs to Bigfoot, crop circles, ice circles. We got crypto creatures. We got treasure hunters. I mean, it's just a whole gamut of material that we can find here in Utah. And if you guys are ever interested in my work, you can hit me up on Instagram or Facebook. And before I in my speech, I'd like to maybe plug a little bit of some of my artwork that I brought to sell. I'll be setting up over here tomorrow, so guys can see some of the paintings I brought for sale. I brought a few last year. They sold pretty good, and I figured this crowd would like my work more than most, because you guys are into the same type of things I have. Here's one of my paintings here. That's for sale. It's a skinwalker. If you guys want to check it out, I'll have it over here at Ryan's booth later. And like I say, I'll be back here tomorrow with some of my paintings. I probably bought 8 or 10 paintings with me. So if you're interested in that, or interested in any of the paintings that I do, I only brought a few with me, but you can check out my work on Facebook or Instagram and hit me up there. I do commissions. So, and also my photographs online, everybody is really loving them. Those are for sale too. I can make prints. I work at a sign shop, so I can make prints of those on canvas or acrylic or whatever you want. So if you're interested in any of that, hit me up. Other than that, if you have a sighting that you'd like to share with me, I'd love to hear them. I'm always game to be open to hear people's stories. So come find me and hit me up. I will tell you some personal stories as well if you want to hear those, but that would be kind of like on a one-on-one thing. So I appreciate you guys. I love this event. I hope to be invited back next year. I'm going to let Ryan do his thing now, and I appreciate you guys. Come here, Dave.
Yeah, this is a piece of Dave's artwork, and this is for speaking tonight with us in Moon Lake gathering. And, we're going to just take 2 minutes because Ryan is going to speak, and they're hooking up his iPhone for some video stuff, and it'll just take a minute. Everybody having fun? We say this and we do mean it. We get together January, February. We said, well, we're going to do it again. And so it's not like this is going to happen for sure every year. But what do you think? Here?
I don't know, Mark. I don't know. Salt Lake City Convention Center.
Salt Lake City Convention Center.
Yeah, I don't think so. You know, we've been.
You gonna pay for
we
it?
actually looked into it a little bit to do some inside events, and you know, I'm the one that fights it more than the rest of the guys, and they fight it too. But it just takes the flavor away, don't you think?
Yep.
I really do. Now, don't forget, tomorrow you can hit every one of these guys up and do a one-on-one, a Q&A, BS with them, and they're going to be doing all the breakouts. So, well, I've got nothing to say. I'm just milking it for 5 minutes. You know, we do appreciate Fisher metal detectors coming. Early on, we have done this with, you know, we've done that as well, but Fisher's really stepped up to the plate. We appreciate they bring these events, and rather, and if they believe you that you can have that many people, and so we appreciate them for giving us the, you know, the opportunity to be with them. Terry, you got anything? You was telling me you wanted to do something.
I don't know if I do or not, but
There you go.
tell your ghost story.
Yeah, ghost story.
Let's
hear the dead man
Hey, I just, you know, all the people that have helped, and there's been a lot of people that have helped put this on. It's not just a few of us. It's definitely not me. If it wasn't for these other guys, these happened. But if it wasn't for you guys coming out, we wouldn't be doing it, you know. And like he said, Fisher Metal Detectors has stepped up to the plate and came and donated metal detectors and that. I don't know if a metal detecting company has ever come to Utah or not, but we got the Fisher Metal Detector Company right here, right now. You know, and on top of that, tomorrow, we've got the breakout sessions from 10 o'clock till 4 o'clock. You can learn about all kinds of things. KGC treasures, Spanish treasures. Fisher metal detectors will show them how to run the metal detectors. How, if you got a question on what type of detector you need for the type of treasure hunting you're doing. What else we got? We got Utana will be talking about giants. We got a class, there'll be a class on dowsing. We got Bill Bettinson, you can do one-on-one questions with him and ask you more about Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Rob Kreider, man, he's going to be speaking tomorrow night along with Dan Dillman. These guys, man, these guys are helping make this event, man, an epic event, along with Bill Bettinson and Alien Dave and Ryan Burns. So there's going to be a lot going on tomorrow. So I don't know. We still stalling for time?
Yeah.
Tell a story.
Tell a story? I don't have a story off the top of my head. Man, I wasn't prepared for a story.
No name story, you know.
Somebody interesting you've talked to.
Well, I don't want to talk about that.
You sold bars in your hand before. First cave?
So Utana Jepson is going to be talking about Brewer's Cave at the breakout sessions, man. So if you got any questions, you want to know more about Brewer's Cave, man, talk to Utana at the breakout sessions tomorrow. The Giants. Man, there's a lot of knowledge here. You know, one of the biggest things that I like about this event is that there is a lot of knowledge here. If you've got some questions on a treasure site, or you got questions on Bigfoot, or you got questions on UFOs, man, there's somebody here that might have the answers to that. And so I know I've talked to a few of you, and I'm supposed to get with you to share, to introduce you some people, and I forgot who you are. So definitely come with me tomorrow. Come look me up, and we'll go find these people tomorrow who I think you need to talk to. What else?
Lost Dutchman?
The Lost Dutchman?
You don't want to talk about it here.
Well, I don't know that much about the Lost Dutchman, but those guys, the Dutch Hunters Rendezvous, they put on a rendezvous. It's usually in November this week. This year it's going to be in October. Man, them guys know a lot about the Lost Dutchman. I don't, but there's a lot of great stories there.
Mystery Glyphs?
The mystery. I don't have a lot of time to talk about a lot of stuffs.
I don't know.
Because hopefully we're going to get going here pretty soon. Oh, okay.
Oh, Terry, all right, brother.
Anyways, I just want to thank all you guys, and I appreciate you.
Thank you, Terry.
Thank you, Terry.
Terry's our leader.
I'm
Terry's our leader.
I'm no leader.
Take the leader.
Take the lead.
Makes me feel
Official up here. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
I feel super official now. All right. And if you hear any barking, that's my dog. I apologize. I've had him 4 days. He's 7 months old, and yeah, we're still figuring things out. Okay. So my name is Ryan Burns. I have a long and complicated history with the paranormal, if you want to call it that, UFOs, UAPs, cryptozoological entities, shapeshifters, and none of it was really anything I planned for. Which has brought me to the realization that some of us are just kind of, drawn into this thing for whatever reason. Not always good. Sometimes it's bad. Other times it's sketchy, but it's always super interesting and it makes life fun. Yeah. So I guess where I'll start is I'm going to kind of make this a little bit interactive. So a lot of people, will ask me and other individuals who've had experiences for a lot of their life, what is it? Are they connected? Are they interrelated? Are these benevolent entities? Are they just all cosmic space brothers? Or are we dealing with a more nefarious, more malevolent entity? And I think that it's both. I think we have a wide spectrum of non-human intelligence, non-corporeal entities that have interacted and engaged with mankind for a long time. And, whether it's people in the Bible or whether it's people down the street that say they saw a UFO, I believe that these things are all displaying themselves for one particular reason or another. Some of them are nefarious, trying to coax you over to do things that may not be in your best interest. And other times, I think it's sort of a supernatural or paranormal tap on the shoulder that you're on the right path when you're starting to get exacerbated by life, brought down, and kind of losing hope, right? So I think there's the wide gamut of all of these things. And a lot of people don't like to touch on the spiritual aspect, but the unfortunate truth is that the science is starting to prove that you have to. In other words, when you look at the neuroscience, basically what's happening between the ears of experiencers, contactees, the guy down the road, maybe even the people in the Bible, you realize that the same part of the brain is utilized when you have a paranormal experience, a supernatural experience, or something that you qualify as a spiritual experience. Same exact part of the brain. And the way they found this out is a doctor named Dr. Persinger started doing some tests with really crude stuff. He was trying to help Alzheimer's patients, which were going downhill quickly. And he basically took a motorcycle helmet, and this was in the 70s, a motorcycle helmet. He stuck some electromagnets with wires in random positions inside the helmet, said, hey, let's try something, throw it on. It can't get any worse, right? And they tested these things out. It was originally called the Persinger helmet. It's now been called the God helmet. And the reason it's been called the God helmet is when these electromagnetic nodes inside the helmet were activated, yes, there was huge improvement from Alzheimer's, from all kinds of memory loss, from a lot of debilitating brain scenarios. However, almost without exception, there was what could only be described as contact with angels, demons, or extraterrestrials. And I think that those are all much, related to the brain, and the same portion of the brain that categorizes things as spiritual experiences or paranormal experiences or something supernatural that just tells you get out of here. And that science, the neuroscience behind it, kind of got me on the path of something known as neurotheology, which is how the brain interacts with theology, or the study of more spiritual items. So at first I had to prove it to myself that there's a little more than just that. That's a lot of proof. There's a couple other technologies that are also utilized that provide very similar experiences. A property I own here in the basin known as Space Wolf Research has an individual who's involved with testing some of these things right on the other side of us. And so there's other technologies that do this as well. Not to get and bore you with the different technologies, they do the same thing as the God helmet. So there's that aspect of it. The other issue is that recent leaked scans, brain scans, of ex-government employees, particularly propulsion experts, rocket scientists, people that are in areas of high strangeness on black budget projects, and anybody that's dealing with exotic propulsion. After continued exposure to these items, they started to get what has been coined interference syndrome. It used to be known as UFO syndrome, but these leaked slides that came off of a CIA doctor named Kit Green and made it out into the UFO arena. These leaked slides of basically, brain scans that we're talking about of very high functioning, rocket scientists in many cases, people that are dealing with top secret exotic propulsion. These brain scans showed that they had basically a lot of dead spots on their brain. And it's the same with people in locations of high strangeness dealing with black projects and that hush-hush stuff that uses the alien word. And basically these dead spots appeared to be caused by prolonged exposure to some of these things. Interestingly, when you look back at the Bible and you hear about things like the Ark of the Covenant and a bunch of other things, close participation with non-corporeal entities, angels, demons, what have you, there were debilitating aspects, health problems that came about from that as well. But not to get derailed, the brain scans basically showed brains that looked like Swiss cheese. These guys should be drooling, and unfortunately that wasn't the case, because that would be the science proving that dead brains equal somebody who cannot participate in high functioning government positions. What they actually found, because that would be the science behind it, hey, your brain looks like Swiss cheese, you should be in a corner, not being able to function like a regular human being. However, what they found is in many cases, these super high functioning rocket scientists, propulsion experts, etc., were actually functioning at higher levels. Their IQs in many cases went up, even though they had less active brain matter. And a little bit interesting is many of them started to get patents on things that they really didn't have to test. They just knew they worked. So they were kind of receiving downloads, right, from something out there. And this was troubling, mainly because when these individuals would, for lack of a better word, retire and quit being in these highly classified positions or areas of high strangeness, or no longer integral to many of these black projects, when they would retire, they would have a rapid decline. Like whatever was downloading this information into their brain, whatever was interacting with their IQ and making them in many cases smarter than before, just kind of dropped the mic, unplugged, and they would just literally decline very quickly. Because of that, they would get headaches, they would get a bunch of very debilitating brain illnesses, and their families started making claims against the government. And this is why the CIA doctor Kit Green had to start looking at these slides, had to start testing these individuals, and had to start getting ICD-10 codes for insurance claims. What he realized, something the government didn't want to hear, is there's something going on when these guys are in areas of high strangeness, when they're dealing with these top secret black budget exotic propulsion systems that may be reverse engineered, when there's interaction with non-human intelligence, etc. So the government didn't want to hear that, but that's what they heard. It's very similar to Havana syndrome and is actually kind of in the same category. If you've heard of that, a lot of CIA guys have had that. I had the opportunity to have Mike Baker, the ex-CIA agent, out to Space Wolf Research, and he told me a lot about that particular part of it, and he had friends who had actually some major head trauma due to that sort of thing. Sorry, I'm not used to wearing a mic, so I'm probably tapping it. So there's something there. So the science keeps providing this proof. So then you got to ask yourself, well, what are these things? You know, I don't believe they're kumbaya, just benevolent space brothers here to, like, you know, give you magical unicorns and sparkle dust. Not all of them. I think there's some malevolent ones that are here to do some really hideous stuff. And I think there's a lot of what I would categorize as the middle ground. So you have the light on one side, you have the dark on the other, and the majority of them are in the gray area, which is why I think a lot of people call them grays. Of course, there's the color of the skin and all that. But they may actually show themselves as something that you're willing to see. So what's happening in our minds neurologically has a lot to do with what is displayed to us. And some of the best research that's ever been done on UFOs, in my opinion, has been done right here in the basin, in the Uinta Basin of Utah. And it has been done by people nobody would have expected to do some of the best research. People like Frank Salisbury from the University of Utah. People like Junior Hicks, right here from the Uinta Basin of Utah. And others who have gotten really involved with it. So what they realized, and these guys were very spiritual, very family-oriented, men with values. And you know, this stuff would keep them up at night. And they realized their theory is that these strange objects, these strange animals, whatever they are, would display themselves to individuals for a particular purpose. That particular purpose was catered specifically to that individual. The colors, the craft, the way it moves, could be very much sending a message that we don't understand and that interacts with our brain. And a couple of the consciousness devices that people are using for brains and the neuroscience having to do with it are one that is called an angelamp, which is basically creation of a Catholic priest who was downloaded a little lamp that looked like this microphone, and it has a light on the end with LEDs in different colors, and they flash in a particular sequence. And if you have your eyes closed under that lamp and you cover your ears and hear, you will have an experience very much akin to what has been called experience. Now, the DMT experience is something that the body actually creates naturally, and it's released at the time of birth and at the time of death. And little bits are released when you have a supernatural experience, a super spiritual experience, or something along those lines. So it's something we create, and our body knows when to release it. It kind of deafens the blow of birth, deafens the blow of death, and these other super traumatic, tragic experiences. Well, these lights flashing in this particular order were releasing the same, chemical in our bodies, and people were again having, similar to Persinger's God helmet, they were having experiences with aliens, demons, or extraterrestrials. Fast forward another guy, that was a Catholic priest, another guy who was sort of like way new age and in touch with ETs and claimed to channel them. He claimed to get a very similar download and channeled something called the Pandora star, which had a few more lights, a few different colors, a different rate of blinking. And he said that he got this information channeled to him from extraterrestrials. But basically it does the same thing to the brain, releases the same chemical, you have the same experience. And these are technologies you can flip on, flip off, and you're done. I don't recommend it, but you can. Now, what's interesting about this is it's again activating that same portion of the brain where you're running into things that are spiritual, things that are supernatural. And so then you get the question, okay, so in my opinion, there's a spectrum of these things. So where do they come from? What are they doing here? If they're from somewhere else, how do they get here? And if it appears like magic. Is it? You know, if it's something we can't do, is it magic? Well, I think that any technology that baffles our mind could be, at least in our experience, viewed as magic, but it might in fact be technology. And we found this out through a lot of what they call reverse engineering of breadcrumbs left behind, maybe on purpose, by some of these entities. So I'm going to play a little clip of audio from a gentleman named Bob Lazar, and I got this sent to me by Doug Wright. He's somewhere in the audience. But this is, in scientific terms, explains how just because something is visiting us from very far, that it does not have to like take a long time to do it. And then I'll catch on right afterwards. Hopefully we can hear it. And we can't. One moment.
John Madsen.
He's coming.
And really quickly, this comes from what's called the Lazar tape, which is a really hard tape to get a hold of. It's by Gene Huff and Bob Lazar. And Bob Lazar, for those who are unfamiliar, he was a scientist working on a very secret project at a place called S4, about 15 miles south of Area 51. And it's not a very good tape, so it's actually nice that it's just music here. It was, I think it came out in 1988.
Hi, I'm Bob Lazar. During late 1988 and early 89, I worked on the propulsion systems of extraterrestrial vehicles for the United States government. The hardware and technology I was exposed to should be placed in the proper hands of the scientific community, and it is the right of every person on Earth to know that there is physical evidence which proves that there is life elsewhere, and that at least one form of that life has been here. For those of you whose information about me is limited to this video, I'll give you a brief background. I'm a physicist. I have degrees in physics and electronics technology. I worked in a number of scientific programs, some of which required top security clearances, of which the most easily verifiable is my early 1980s job here at Los Alamos Mason Physics Facility in Los Alamos, New Mexico. Between December of 88 and April of 89, I worked as a senior staff physicist in what has to be the most secret project in history. My place of work was a facility at an area known as S4 on the Nellis Air Force Range in central Nevada. Area S4 is located approximately 15 miles south of the infamous Area 51 installation at Groom Lake, where the U-2 and SR-71 spy planes were developed. For the duration of my employment at S4, I was paid by the United States Navy. For the purpose of this video, I'm going to segregate the information contained here into two separate parts. The first part will deal with information with which I've had hands-on experience and personal instruction. In other words, not only did I read briefings and not only was I taught the theories of these technologies, but they were demonstrated for me and I know they are true and accurate. Some of the points covered in this first section will be how vast distances of space are traveled by virtue of an intense gravitational field, how this gravitational field is generated, what the power source is and how it functions, and general information about disks and the project at S4. The second part of this will deal with subjects on which I've read supporting information, yet for the most part, I had no other way to corroborate the information or ascertain its accuracy. When we get to part 2, it will be obvious why proof of some of this information could not be conclusive. Some of the points covered in the second section will be information about the beings that brought us this technology, and how these beings have historically interacted with man. I've been prudent in selecting what to expose here, and I think that some of this information should not be made available to the general public. This information is being conveyed to you as it was to me, with the exception that in most cases I've simplified things for those of you with non-scientific and non-technological backgrounds. So let's begin. At the beginning of this first section, I'm going to give you 3 short science lessons. Once you've learned them, you'll not only know more about interstellar travel than almost anyone else in the world, but you'll know the actual method another civilization has used to travel from another star system to the planet Earth. Now, during the course of this, I'm going to have to relate information that I've learned at S4 to information that we're already aware of. And when I say we, I mean the general mainstream scientific community. So as not to waste too much time explaining established scientific facts and theories, when I say we know this or we know that, please feel free to consult any qualified scientist, professor, or science teacher to have them explain my statements to you. One of the most predominantly asked questions is, how is it possible to cross vast expanses of space without exceeding the speed of light? Or how can you travel in reasonable time and economy between points that are light years apart? Now keep in mind that the speed of light is 186,000 miles a second, which translates into roughly 669 million miles an hour. And a light year is the distance traveled in 1 year at the speed of light. Proxima Centauri, which is a star system nearest ours, would take 4 years to reach traveling at the speed of light. So up until now, when we've examined the requirements to travel these distances, we've always had to consider the problems of traveling at a speed near the speed of light. This poses problems with propulsion, navigation, fuel capacities, and even when you consider the effects of acceleration on space-time, which include time dilation, mass increase, lane contraction, and a whole host of other things, it quickly becomes evident that this type of travel would require a level of technology that man has not yet achieved. The truth of the matter is that traveling these distances does require a level of technology that man has not yet achieved. But it has nothing to do with flying in a linear mode near the speed of light. We know that the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. So in our universe, we've always assumed that the fastest way from point A to B was to travel in a straight line at the speed of light. Well, the fact is that when you're dealing with space-time and you enjoy the capability of generating an intense gravitational field, the fastest way from point A to B is to distort or warp or bend the space-time between point A and B, bringing point A and B closer together. The more intense the gravitational field, the greater the distortion of space-time and the shorter the distance between points A and B.
Okay, so that's the science lesson. So basically what he's saying is that you don't have to, for example, if I was going to go from here to Duchesne and I wanted to travel there, I would have to go really fast to get there in a second. However, it'd be a lot easier if I had a reactor, something that would create gravitational distortion. And gravity is something that is in waves. If you believe the science, it's not something that is gravitons. There's a few different scientific perspectives, but the wave theory has been the most predominant. I'm not a big science guy, but I've just like brushed up on this because I'm a nerd. But the fact is, if you have the right fuel source, if you can create enough gravitational field, you can distort the space-time continuum. And the best way to explain it is if you had a piece of paper and you had Duchesne over here, and you had Altamont City Park here, you could travel across, but it'd be a lot easier if you just folded the piece of paper, and then they're right next to each other, and you're there. And that's what a reactor that is being bombarded by protons with the right fuel source will do. And a reactor is a pretty simple thing. I didn't know it was, but it is. It's a lot like what they're doing at CERN. Actually, it's exactly what they're doing with CERN. They're bombarding protons into a reactor, and they're making stuff go really, really fast. Interestingly, but not to get totally derailed, they're getting something called the God particle. There we go with that God name again. When it's something they can't explain, you just call it God. And with good reason. And of course, they're also getting what's known as antimatter. And antimatter is super important with this theory of space travel. So what you do is you get this reactor and you put the right source of fuel in it. And I'm gonna just go with the honor system, and I don't know if there's any way to show you guys. Well, I'll try. Okay, so there's something that Bob Lazar coined back in the 80s that he called element 115. And element 115 is something that didn't exist in the 80s according to the scientific community. In fact, this was the #1 thing where they said, well, we debunked this guy. This doesn't exist, it's not on the elemental table. But, lo and behold, in 2013, I believe it was, we have something that's found called Moscovium in Russia. Now, Moscovium is element 115. It's the same element. However, they could not create in Russia a very stable form of it. They created a form that was gone in milliseconds, but they verified it existed. So the fact that they verified that it existed and it has a place on the elemental chart really proved Bob Lazar's point that this stuff is real, because you can't just pull this rabbit out of your hat and then have it appear, you know, years and years and years later. Now, Bob Lazar claimed that this stable form of element 115 was in a triangle like this right here, and that it would only take 0.223 grams of that placed in a reactor, which is basically like a little urn, you know, inside of these craft. He called them the sports models. They were basically like you would see discs or the traditional UFO. They would put this on the center level. This reactor would then they put the stable form in a little triangle. 0.223 grams would last 20 to 30 years of use. That's how long it would take for that element 115 as a fuel source to deplete. What's really interesting about this is how it works. They bombard it with protons, it creates antimatter that goes down to these reactors below it, and you bend the space-time. So really all you need to do is have a comfortable place to sit, just like you guys, right? Like you just need a comfortable place to sit, and you can go where you need to go when you bend or fold that piece of paper to go where you need to go, and you don't have to take light years to get there. Interestingly enough, with element 115, there was also a purported element 115 fuel rod or fuel source found here in the Uinta Basin. And this was found by Junior Hicks. He's a gentleman that I was blessed enough to meet, befriend, and talk to various times, usually at Rocky's in Roosevelt over a raspberry fresh shake. And Junior was basically someone who was given a special pass, so to speak, on the old Bigelow Ranch, the old Sherman Ranch, the old Myers Ranch. It goes by many names. And he found one day a little rod that didn't look like the rest of the metal. A little rod that he said, I'll stick this in my pack, I'll take it home to my shop, and I'll do a few tests on it. He's a science teacher, smart guy, very curious mind, a beautiful human being. So he wanders down to his shop when he gets home, and he tries to cut this thing. He uses all the blades in his disposal, even a diamond blade, and he's ruining all his blades. So he's like, this isn't gonna work. You know, these are expensive. Then he heats it up with a torch. He says, maybe if I soften it up, I can cut it, I can bend it, I can move it. He heats it up as hot as he can get it, and he accidentally grabs it with his hand as he's grabbing something to bend or cut it, and he realizes it's cold to the touch, which is impossible in his estimation. He then, being very scientifically minded, puts voltage into one end of the bar, and he realizes that there's an exponential amount of voltage coming out the other end of this metal. Well, at this point, he says, this stuff shouldn't exist. He gives the National Institute of Discovery Science, formerly known as NIDS, a call. Those are the scientists that worked under Robert T. Bigelow. And he says, I've got something here, guys, and I think you want to look at it. They said, yeah, we'll come pick it up. We'll let you know what it is. We'll get back to you. They came, they picked it up, and they didn't get back to him. And they didn't get back to him, and they didn't get back to him. So he kept badgering them, hey, what happened to that rod? Well, they said, between you and us, that is element 115. That is a fuel source, potentially for a craft. But you didn't hear it from us, and that basically didn't happen, right? So fast forward to another, or actually I should say, go backwards, since we're time dilating and space traveling. If you go back to 1947, there was a little incident known as the Roswell crash, which was actually more than one crash. A lot of people don't know that. And I've gone with Dave Rosenfeld out there, and we've investigated a lot of it. And what we found was that in a lot of these cases, whether or not these craft are crashing on purpose or maybe crashing by accident, we don't know. But remember, when you fold that piece of paper, you've got to be really, you want to fold that just right. If you fold it a little bit off, if your time dilation is off just by a few inches, you have a catastrophic possibility. So they find back at Roswell a little bar that looks just like this with symbols on it. And these symbols look like no writing anybody's ever seen. The closest thing would be cuneiform, like a form of ancient writing. And again, there has been speculation that this may be some sort of fuel source to this craft, right? So these craft, let's just say that these craft are a way to travel. And a lot of people say, now hold on, I don't buy into the ET thing. I'm very religious, I'm very spiritual, I believe in my Bible. Well, I do too. And, if we look back in the Bible, we have this Ark of the Covenant. Where'd that come from? It sounds like technology to me. Sounds pretty spiritual to me. And it sounds like it had some catastrophic consequences along the lines of antimatter or radiation with people that tinkered, toyed, or even carried the thing. So it is, in some ways, a technology. And, to some degree, I would say to allege that spiritual entities, be them aliens or whatever, angels, demons, anyway, anything that's not us, that has some degree of capability where they can do things that we don't understand, to assume that that is not a technology would be to greatly undermine or limit the creativity of an ultimate creator or God, right? And that would be my theory, is to say, and there's parts of the Bible that mention these things. They mention Michael, the archangel, coming down in a chariot. Well, I don't think it was a chariot with horses on it, right? Even that would be a technology. It had to be something he was riding in, at least a comfortable seat or something. I don't know. It calls it a chariot of fire. I don't know what a chariot is. I doubt that it was an actual chariot of fire, but at the time, that was probably the best way to describe a technology that the people didn't understand. Be that a spiritual technology, which arguably praying is probably the most high-tech spiritual technology, in my opinion. So we don't know what we're dealing with, but what we do know is that there are these breadcrumbs that are dropped, and science has tried to put them together, and what science is finding out is they're trying to explain it scientifically, but because of the dots connecting the way they are, it's coming back around to the spiritual. And we're finding this with all kinds of paradoxes. We have quantum fields, we have energy fields, which are starting to show that these things are more conscious. And we have things like protons and electrons acting differently when they're viewed by an observer than when they're by themselves. This is kind of throwing science a curveball. And what we're finding through like the double slit experiment, I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, and others, that a lot of things react differently when human beings as observers interact with them. Dave Rosenfeld was mentioning just last night that even water, Michio Kaku, a quantum theorist, has shown, and others, that even water reacts differently when a human being puts some intention to the water. If we even write, anger on a glass of water, under a microscope it looks differently than if we write happy or peace or whatever. We know that plants react differently if you talk nicely to them, and treat them well. They have, for lack of a better word, consciousness. And if everything has some form of consciousness, then we might be dealing with technologies that are literally non-human, because a plant's not a human, a dog's not a human, but they very much react to the way we interact with them, to the way we predispose ourselves and the energy we put forth. Now, what's really interesting, going back to the Lazar tape, is that he says among the most top secret information that he was told to absolutely not share with anyone was the fact that these non-human intelligences classified us as containers. They viewed us as containers. He also went on to say that human beings had been genetically manipulated at least 65 times. That was in 1988. Who knows these days? But that they viewed us as containers. And of course the question is, containers for what? Is it containers for a human soul? Or could it be containers that are much like those water containers, and that we are able to fill ourselves with our own consciousness, our emotions? What we feed ourselves with is what we become. If you see somebody that feeds themselves with good deeds, with being kind to others, with all of these things, they somehow exponentially seem to garner or gather this like amazing positivity, right? We see this in all kinds of new age stuff like The Secret, manifesting your destiny, and you become what you want to, what you think, and as a man thinketh he is. So it's kind of an action, what we feed our minds with, what our thoughts are, and what we engage interpersonally with ourselves, with that with that ego, with that. Anyway, I don't want to turn it into like a self-help new age, thing. But if you're sitting around all day watching horror movies and porn, you might not be the most service-oriented individual, theoretically. So, nothing against horror movies, but so if we are containers, and if this is the most top secret thing that, they do not want the public to know, that you are what you eat and your mind is what it interacts with, then we delve into something a lot deeper with these displays of UFOs, which there's a lot of here in the Uinta Basin. Displays of cryptozoological variants of animals, which there's a lot in the basin. If you're one of these individuals who are lucky enough to see something that's out of the ordinary, I argue that this is a paranormal, supernatural tap on the shoulder that you're either doing something right, or you should be, or a reminder that there is something much larger than us, and that we can interact with it and engage with it. And we don't have to get down with like the day-to-day 9-to-5 boring stuff that, you know, we all have to do. So I think I'll go into a Q&A session here. I'm going to pass around the Element 115 and the little Element 115 bar so you kind of get a visual of what it looks like. And I'd love to just, I'm just going to do the honor system, pass them around, and I'll just take any questions. The Kansas City boys said they're going to do the honor system and just take them. Any questions? Comments?
What did Junior Hicks do with his area? Did he ever find more than just one bar?
You know, what I was told is that he gave it to the Bigelow team. They checked it out and they didn't give it back. And there is a very interesting, and this could be, you know, on purpose. You know, they might be trying to protect the public, but in my estimation and in my research, I have found absolutely no one higher on the totem pole of intelligence than Robert T. Bigelow. He knows more than presidents. He knows more than admirals, than generals, and it doesn't surprise me one bit that the information goes in but doesn't come out. Doesn't mean he's nefarious or bad, but it just might be something that the general public can't handle for whatever reason. And I just got, well, I'll just share it here. I've got information. Was that 3 days ago when we were driving up? On the drive up, I got mind-blowing new information that's never been shared before from somebody on the Bigelow team as I was driving up from Nevada. And they said, hey, we saw that you're really looking into this Element 115 thing. We want you to know something. This is somebody who worked for him, somebody who was trusted by him, somebody who is his friend. And they said that Bob Lazar was hired by Robert T. Bigelow to synthesize Element 115 in a stable form. This is, you guys are the first to hear it. This is new information. And of course, my question is, what did he do with it? Did it happen? Did it work? And I was told, well, it was a need-to-know basis. I didn't necessarily need to know. They didn't tell me it worked. I don't know if it worked. They more or less said nothing came of it. But that's usually the answer you get, a lot like that bar. Nothing came of it. We don't know what, you know, this is what it might be, but don't share it with anybody. So, yeah, that's some pretty new and amazing information. I guess what, anyway, there's more to it. But any other questions?
Where'd you get your samples?
Repeat the question.
Where'd I get my samples?
Yeah.
Okay, so I've got some samples. These I got from a trusted source. These, don't worry, you're not going to get cancer handling them. These are just exact copies of what it would look like. So you're not, don't worry, you know, you don't have to wear a hazmat suit, but the same weight, the same look, the same everything, but without the consequences. I actually do have what's known as a metamaterial sample that came right here from the Uinta Basin. And what a metamaterial is it's a material or a metal that does not act right. It could not be created in at least a normal way. So it would either have to be synthesized in places off planet or in laboratories under special conditions. And I had this tested by a place called Vesta in Las Vegas. And you find really interesting attributes like high levels of bismuth. You find a lot like Junior Hicks found with that element 115 bar. You find things and characteristics about the metal that don't act like normal metals. In many cases, like the Roswell case, the metal was a specific shape. They would bend it up, do whatever they did to it, and it would go right back to its original form eventually. So stuff like that. But there is metamaterial here in the Uinta Basin. That's proven. And if you ever see a UFO and you see what looks like molten lava coming out of it or off of it, they call it slag. And we've witnessed this a few times. Dave Rosenfeld, I'm sure a few other researchers here, where you see this like glowing red hot metal coming off of these. Try to see where that goes and try to go there and pick some of it up, because that is metamaterial. Kind of long-winded, sorry.
Scientists have lost their lives testing UFO pieces. Do you know anything about that?
I'm going to use a quote that's not mine, and that's people have been hurt, people have been killed. It's not just an observational form of data.
One more. Any UFOs crashed in Utah or our Uinta Basin?
In my opinion, yes.
I have 3 stories. Yes.
Love to hear them.
Ryan,
Yes.
do you know if any human has got traveled like this?
Yes, this is a good question. He asked if any human has traveled like this. Dan did here. Good question. We have humans that are very close in the Uinta Basin that have traveled like this, believe it or not. There is an interesting book called UFO Pilots. Speaking of containers, these are contactees and abductees which had experiences and were basically told, hey, we need an extra hand. We need you to drive this for whatever reason. And one of the individuals in this Grant Cameron book called UFO Pilots is right here from Utah, actually down by Price. His name is Ron Johnson. He's a guy that his whole life has had very interesting sort of military, MIB, childhood experiences. Project Blue Book went right through there. Actually, Project Blue Book went through all of Price, Utah, all through the Uinta Basin. Some older people may have remembered, people coming door to door asking if you've seen a UFO or weird things like that. Or if they heard that you saw one, they would pay you a little visit. Interestingly enough, there is more to this. Here in the Uinta Basin, there are examples of government projects that have to do with humans being on these. Now, in Bob Lazar's case, the sport model, as he called it, he got inside of it and looked in it, and there were seats that were too small for him to occupy. He said that they were like for small children. However, this, would easily fall into like, oh, well, they're alien grays. Well, remember the Bible has like cherubim and all kinds of seraphim, and there's different sizes and shapes. And with the UFO Sky Pilot book by Grant Cameron, it basically says the craft is just, like the couch or a comfortable place to sit for a minute, if that, while you go from here to there. And here in the Uinta Basin of Utah, there was a very interesting scenario and project, and I'm gonna delve into it. I didn't think I'd go here, but I'm gonna go there because that's a good question. Multiple ranch owners here in the Uinta Basin were approached by a particular individual named General Jeremiah Davis. General Jeremiah Davis was a decorated general and a real person. And not only that, he's a real person who actually called into a radio show when they were talking about some things. And he said, hey, this is who I am. This is what I do. I'm in a craft right now. I'm a part of something called the Galactic Federation of Hindon. Hindon, H-I-N-D-O-N. Sounds pretty far-fetched. It was the Don Nickoloff show. Sounds pretty far-fetched. Well, there's that, but then we have multiple ranch owners that were contacted by this particular general offering them certain information. Ranch owners here in the Uinta Basin, several properties. And interestingly, before I bought Space Wolf Research, and this is way after we started going there when it was known as the Southern Vantage Point by all the researchers, the more experienced ones than myself. It was an abandoned spot for many years, much like some of the other ranches. And anyway, I got some information when I started sniffing around when I heard it was for sale, at least the first 10 acres. And I started getting some information from some individuals which baffled my mind. They were sending me voicemails, and one particular individual says, hey, I got proof that this was part of a project when it was abandoned called Solar Warden. And being a bit of a conspiracy buff, in my mind, I had completely debunked this project, Solar Warden. So the Solar Warden project is very much like this Galactic Federation, where there's a group that kind of overlooks the cosmos or the galaxy. Now, the word galaxy is really interesting, especially from a biblical perspective, but I'll get to that in a minute. It's like, it still would fall under the universe, so like the one verse, the one creation. But as far as this federation, this galactic federation, this solar warden, we all know what a warden does in a prison, and it's kind of like, you know, like the cosmic cops, kind of like Space Force. And interestingly enough, this is not the last time that we would hear terms like Galactic Federation. But I received from this person all this information, and I said, I've got to see something tangible. I got to see some proof. And do you have anything? And they said, I'll meet with you and I'll show you some paperwork. And they showed me some paperwork that looked very old and 70s and 80s. And it's talking about, you know, these properties, and this particular property being part of something called Solar Warden, which interestingly enough is very similar to like the Star Wars Defense Initiative, SDI, that Ronald Reagan put into place. But it expands off of that, and there's more top secret levels to it. I'm not saying that's not a part of it, because it very likely is, and it's exponentially grown since then. So this isn't the last time we would hear this Galactic Federation, this Solar Warden, this idea of this massive conglomerate, right, dealing with space. We have Haim Eshed, which for lack of a better word is like the father, the grandfather of the Israeli space program. He is like their guru, the guy that knows more than anyone else from an intelligence perspective. When he got a little up there in years during the Donald Trump administration, he came out publicly and said, you know, I think it's important that everybody know that there is a galactic federation that we are all involved with, and that the sitting president of the United States actually knows about it, but probably won't say anything. This shocked the world. And it shocked me because here it's popping up again, Galactic Federation, and then lo and behold, the sitting president starts Space Force. So could all be a coincidence, but I think there's something there. Any other questions, or do we want to hear the story from Daryl? Is that Daryl that said he had a story?
Ryan.
Yes.
Is it required to be a contactee before you can see hands-on?
I didn't hear it, sorry.
I heard about the whole part. Is being a contactee required?
Oh, for being a pilot. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, great question. In my experience, from what I've heard, these contactees are more or less bred into their positions, and many times by the government, very times subliminally, and many times their parents might even know. And And it's not a bad thing. But what that means is that they are involved with programs that would, how can I put this? Reward behaviors that make them more conducive to interacting or engaging with non-human intelligence. And what they've found is it's sort of like the barber shop joke about a barber shop. If you hang out at a barber shop long enough, you get a haircut. Or if you hang out at the muffler shop long enough, you buy a muffler. It's basically like that. If you hang out with the pack of wolves enough, you learn to howl. And that's kind of the idea, is they will put certain kids that show attributes that already predispose them from their classrooms, and they'll enter special programs. A lot of these go under the guise nowadays of STEM, science, technology, engineering, math. But I'm not saying that's it, but they go under the guise of some of these programs and offshoots of those. And special field trips here, special field trips there. And so yeah, they kind of reward kids that start to engage or be very open to some of these projects that encourage engagement with non-human intelligence. Interestingly enough, here in the Uinta Basin, the researchers that have delved deeply into a lot of projects looking into this stuff, and a couple of these projects that went under one umbrella basically came out in a New York Times article by Ralph Blumenthal and Leslie Keene, and they basically kind of outed them. The article was called Glowing Auras and Black Budgets or something like that. And it basically said, hey guys, there is this real project that took place, a lot of it right here in the Uinta Basin of Utah, that went under the guise of ATIP and OSAP. ATIP was sort of the forward-leaning front of it all. That was the Advanced Aerial Threat Identification Program. Basically, hey, there's something in the sky, maybe we should find out if it's a threat. And it got, that we know of, $22 million in black budget money from the Pentagon. There could be more. However, on the backside, this had another project that was known as OSAP, which was the Advanced Aerospace Weapons Systems Application Program, which sounds a lot like SDI, Star Wars Defense Initiative, Galactic Federation, and Solar Warden. So, I don't know, might just be coincidence, but it's happening. I know that it's happening. Ron Johnson, the guy from Price, has some really interesting stories. He's still alive, and if anybody wants to talk to him, I could give you his number. He'd be open to that. And there's a bunch of other guys that have claimed similar backgrounds and then being asked by these, when in these contactee experiences, hey, case might be. So apparently we can multitask. Any other questions? That, okay, in my experience, yes. And from those that I respect the most, yes. Meaning one of the world's foremost, if not the foremost, remote viewer, his last name is McMonagle. Yeah, he's at the Monroe Institute a lot. He came to the basin, he remote viewed a bunch of stuff, and he basically said that this southwest quadrant, southwest of the old Bigelow Ranch, not necessarily on it, that there was a underground base, and he used the word non-human, which, I mean, alien, it's semantics, right? So there's that. And this is a guy that they would trust with national security. So this isn't, in my mind, pretty good evidence, but one night I was wandering around right through there, real close to there, and I saw, for lack of a better word, at first I thought it was a person. It had a hat on, a ball cap. It had a flannel shirt on. It had a headlamp. It had, and a walkie-talkie. So at first I thought it was a person. And I thought, oh, maybe I'm somewhere I shouldn't be. Maybe I should just stand still. Well, this thing approached me, and it got pretty close on a moonlit night, about to where, between the back bleachers and this last row, somewhere in between there. Pretty close. And it was thin. I would estimate that it may be soaking wet, maybe weighed 100 and change, very little, and it was probably 7 feet tall. And it had a very elongated head. And then, when it saw me, it radioed back to something or someone, and it wasn't speaking English or Spanish or any other language I've ever heard. The closest I would say is it sounded like something out of like a science fiction or an ancient language, something along the lines of very ancient Middle Eastern languages. It did not sound like any language I've ever heard. It radioed back, it got a response, and it sat there for a minute, and then it backed away from me. And the only way I can describe when it first came would be coming up out of the ground. And it was just a moonlit night. I didn't get 100% clear view, but in my opinion, I'd say it wasn't human necessarily, not 100%, and I'd say that it basically came from somewhere underneath.
What's the agenda? What does this all mean?
What are they doing with us?
What are they doing with us, and what's the agenda? Okay, this is a big one. This is a really big one, and I don't know the answer. But I do know they're very interested in us. We have something they want, or we have something they can't have. And
There's a lot they can't have for me.
it might be a soul, it might be free will, it might be just the ability to be in these meat suits and do with them as we please. These containers, as they're called, are, as cumbersome as they are, they're pretty magical. And what I mean by that is we are able to experience the here, the now, in a way that a lot of these non-human intelligences cannot experience it. In fact, many have theorized that they can archonically feed off of us. The more negative ones, the more malevolent ones can archonically feed off of us just getting scared. And that's why they might scare us, because they can feed off of that energy, that emotion that comes out. And that reminds me of my very first experience with what I would call a malevolent entity, at least in the basin. And it happened, smack dab in the epicenter of high strangeness. I was wandering around working as a fishing guide. I was injured and couldn't work, so I was looking for fresh water. I went below a man-made tributary because I assumed there had to be water that was fishable there. I saw what appeared to me to be an elderly Native American in an indigenous blanket shuffling down a red rock ridge. And I rolled down my window and said, "Hey, are you okay? You need a ride?" And it was moving very robotically, very unnaturally. It jumped into my truck, never said a word, but it just mumbled. And within seconds, I was in tears, and it felt like this thing was like picking the positive things that have happened in my life, my happiest moments, and picking the worst moments in my life, kind of like out of a Rolodex, like feeding off of my emotion, and it just left me in tears. And I lost a little time, and so maybe some of them feed off of us archonically, the more malevolent ones. By the same token, the more benevolent ones may actually not be feeding at all, they might be feeding us spiritually and giving us more energy. So just a theory, but I don't know for sure. Oh, the agenda. I forgot. There was a two-part question. The agenda. I think the agenda is one that's biblical in nature, because these entities, no matter what text you're reading, whether it's the Talmud, the Bible, the Quran, they all talk about these things. You know, the Quran talks about the jinn. The Talmud talks about these entities. The Bible talks about these entities. We know that these entities, whatever they are, that there's been descriptions of entities that are not human, and some have alleged can shapeshift and travel vast distances very quickly. There's all kinds of examples, but the reality is they've always been described in similar ways. Interestingly, a lot of the witchcraft that revolves around black magic in the Middle East, like with the jinn, that darker magic is very similar, if not identical, to indigenous black magic or the witchery way, and it's almost identical again to the more European black magic, which we would know as witchcraft. They use the same color candles, they use the same sigils on the ground, they use all of, for lack of a better word, the same system to communicate with these darker entities. And yet back then there was no internet, so how getting the same exact information? And the same is true of, you know, more positive forces. You know, they have very similar mindsets, they create their temples, etc., very similarly, and things like that. So it seems that there is a universalness to it. But I don't know what the agenda is. I really think it's just something that will slowly, we'll probably know when it's too late and I can't share it with you. You know, it'll probably be a few moments after I die that I'm like, oh, that was it. Cool.
Thank you.
You bet.
I'd like to thank Ryan. I'd like to give him this plaque and appreciate him doing his thing. We enjoyed it. Thank you. Appreciate it. So tomorrow the agenda is for us, Dan Dillman, Aztec Gold in the morning, the first speaker. In between speakers is the Florida boys. Will be talking about the 715th Fleet and diving after that, which is going to be, they're all going to be great. Then we have Robert Kreider, which will be talking Bigfoot, and breakouts start at 10 a.m. So rock and roll. Thank you for coming.
And his 115. Where's his 115? Where's Ryan's 115? Get back to him. His element. We pass it around. Make sure it goes back to him.
Oh, yeah. Where's the, what is it?
115.
The 115 sample. Somebody got it? You know where it is? You got it? Okay.
Where do you want to leave the chairs? How about a big hand? Put this together.
Thank you. Guys, that's it for tonight. Tomorrow night, like he said, we got Robert Kreider, who's Bigfoot, but not only is he a Bigfoot, he's a treasure hunter. And we got Dan Dillman, who was on the History Show in search of gold from the Aztecs. They're going to be speaking with us tomorrow, and then all day during the day we'll be doing our breakout stuff. So I'll try and film some of that or have some of that live. But thank you guys for jumping on. I know the quality of the video sucks. We're out here in the middle of there, nowhere. not that great of internet service, but we do have, we did have Strata tried to boost us up so that it was a lot better than last year. So I really appreciate Strata. And so Brian Tucker, no, this is at the Altamont City Park. We had some things going on up at Moon Lake today. There's too many people that come to this that we could have it at Moon Lake City Park. Shani, hello to you too. Anyways, with that said, thank you guys for on. Thank you, Victor. Ayala. Thank you. Vance, thank you, Terry. Be out next weekend. Cool, Vance. Anyways, with that said, appreciate you guys, and that's a wrap.